What's going on, everybody? Brett here. We're back playing some more Total War Warhammer 2 on my YouTube channel, Good Talk Gaming, and we're back into a pretty huge 3v3. So I have no part in this game. This was sent to me by a subscriber, Miro Nava, a great guy who I played some games with on the channel, and I'm excited. I didn't expect him to send me some 3v3 replays. Most people send me some quick battles, but I am stoked. So he's going to be playing as the Dark Elves. His allies are going to be Brettonia and the Lizardmen versus the High Elves, the Dwarves, and the Empire. So kind of an alliance of good guys here on really on both sides, minus the Dark Elves, really. Maybe they're, the lore here is that he was a mercenary hired by the Brettonians and the Lizardmen to fight off these guys, but who knows. Anyway, this is also one of my favorite maps for any size of army play. It's a pretty sweet one. Lots of room to maneuver. There's forests out on the side. There's this huge like ditch in the middle, and there's some little areas of high ground where you can put archers and get some advantages. But anyway, guys, this is my first time watching it. I have no idea what happens, and I'm excited. So, wow. Okay, so there's a lot to cover here. So I've got it in slow-mo. Nobody's moving yet because this is normally the stages in a 3v3 where everyone kind of looks at what everyone else has. For me, I know especially, I'm checking for artillery, right? I'm looking for things like great cannons. We see here that the Empire has 3, which is, I think, pretty standard. They're also chevroned up a little bit, probably to try and give them a bit more accuracy. Not a bad choice. Also, a nice little tightly packed formation here of handgunners. This would not be good if there were any sort of AoE spells being dropped here, but of course they're a far way away, and they're being backed by halberds. I'm sure that the plan is shoot anyone that encroaches on this hill, rush forward with the halberds, and protect everyone. Also, just some standard crossbowmen and handgunners here in the back, with Karl Franz up on his Deathclaw here. So, also has a lot of his abilities, the Reikland Runefang as well as Gal Maraz, if we can hover over him. So giving him great bonus versus large, giving him great melee attack and leadership, and then stand your ground in an AoE. And then of course, Blood Roar is something that Deathclaw has. So whenever he's in melee, enemies around him get -8 leadership. That's such a huge debuff. And those great cannons and the Dwarven artillery, see 3 cannons here as well. Any other artillery? No, just that. Okay, so 3 more cannons out. 3 cannons on each flank is pretty brutal. That's kind of funnels you, makes you want to funnel into the center. And if you try and go around the outside, you're just going to end up getting picked off. So that's the formation there for the Empire. They're taking great shots here at this Bastiladon with the solar engine. If I was the Lizardman player, I'd be doing exactly what he's doing now and pulling him back as far as possible and trying to find another home for him in this engagement. You don't want to lose this much value early on, and there may be some heals to be had on the Brettonian side of the battlefield. I see a damsel with the Lore of Life could potentially be healing. The High Elves now in the center are dropping lots and lots of archer fire. I see Lothern Seaguard with shields. 3 groups. Interesting number there. Normally if you're going with 3, so my idea would be to put 1 on each flank and then perhaps 1 in the back to use as auxiliary spearmen. But that's going to be very good against the large dinosaurs on the other side of the battlefield, as well as any type of cavalry from the Dark Elves or Brettonia. They're both kind of good at using cavalry if they choose to. Cold One Knights and any type of Brettonian knight they'll be good against. And then just of course they have that dual function as archers. They'll be pretty good at that. So the Chameleon Skinks, with their stalk, they're normally able to get pretty up close and personal with any unit that they want to. They also have huge missile resistance. It's been nerfed in the past, but it's still 40%, which is great. But with this much fire, I mean, they're not going to have a good time. By the time they enter combat, you see they've only lost 3 models so far. But by the time they're able to shoot back with their little poison darts, their combat efficiency is going to be so much worse that it's really not going to be a worth it trade. Once again, I would pull them back. I would start marching forward with my front line and make it so that my guys with shields, essentially your Dread Spear type units here, silver shields, very cheap. You also have the Saurus warriors with shields as well. Make them take the brunt of all of this fire, all of this cannon fire and archer fire, while your range units are held in reserve. The skink cohorts are also taking a beating. These guys throw javelins. Very cool unit, very cost-effective unit. They throw poison javelins. you stack a couple of these in your front line as the enemies charge, they shoot, they weaken their stats, they slow them down, and then you just pull them back. Or you let them engage, because at the end of the day, they have essentially the same stats as your standard skink units. So, also a backline here of spearmen. Any regiments of renown? I don't see any. So just standard spearmen to back up these archers, and once again, very good against everything on this side of the battlefield. And then 2 swordmasters of Hoeth to help them deal with elite infantry. And for those of you who don't know what these bad boys look like, check out the swords on these dudes. And he's got 2 of them. Also a lore master of Hoeth, probably my favorite means of spell casting on the High Elf roster. You get 2 things in one, right? You get a deadly melee character, and you also get some of the most essential spells. You get healing and Earthblood. You get Spirit Leech for direct damage to heroes. He took all of his spells, which was definitely a mistake. I would not have done that. Shin's Burning Gaze, Harmonic Convergence, Spirit... I mean, these are just way too many spells. At most, you'll probably find yourself using 2, maybe 3 of them. But if he's your only spellcaster, I mean, maybe this player really values the spell diversity and having lots of tools in their toolkit. Hard to judge, because you never know exactly what you're going to need in a 3v3 battle, that's for sure. And then Tyrion here. I definitely like his cutting of some of the abilities on Tyrion. I think his most essential one, if you're going to bring anything, is Feint and Riposte. Gives him 22% physical resistance, 27 melee defense, 26 melee attack. It's basically like Lokir Felhart's ability on steroids, and we can go over that one real quick, because I'm sure he's taking it. It's his duelist ability, the dreaded duelist. So it has the same melee attack, melee defense, but without the plus 22% physical resistance, which is huge. But he also has the Helm of the Kraken, which gives him regen as well as melee defense, which is extremely powerful. And then Deadly Onslaught for that armor piercing, going to make him a much better duelist in melee. So that's it for these guys. And then the dwarves here, with a standard lord, not a bad choice. Decided to take the Star Metal Plate, so -9 melee attack and AoE around him. Disabled if his leadership drops. Stand your ground once again, just a great solid buff. Longbeards with great weapons here out on the flanks. They do have charge defense against large, so you know they're very good at dealing with cavalry if they need to protect a flank. Not really necessary here. I think the way they deployed, they should have considered the fact that no one's going to get in onto this flank. I would probably at this point, after seeing the deployments, begin moving you know, my left flank's protective units over to my right flank or even to my front line to help them with this engagement. Get them in a position to support your High Elf allies and potentially corral. I wish I had an arrow that I could draw with. Potentially corral. Take these 2 units here, move forward with your handgunners, perhaps place them on this ridge here, and then push forward with these units. Get these units in a line this way. Get these units in a line here. Your cannons are going to get a chance to fire. The Brettonian's either going to engage you with his weak chaff that you'll roll up pretty easily, and then you'll be able to pressure the flank, right? I think his left flank is very secure, and he's perhaps putting too many resources in reserve when it's not really necessary. So interesting here, the Empire player is pushing forward. There's a oh wow, oh my god. Okay, let's pause it for a second because things are about to get wild. 4 groups of Pharaoh Cold Ones. These are one of my favorite units on the Lizardmen roster. You can't get them in the campaign mode, except through like a special spell. But they are available in multiplayer. They're super cheap. They're like 450 gold. They have decent combat stats. But they're more like, use them like direwolves, guys. Use them just like direwolves. Get them up and around and into the back lines. And they have much better combat stats than direwolves, and they rampage. So rampage in some units is a negative, but in others it's a bit of a positive, right? If they're rampaging into backline units, that's fine. It doesn't matter if you lose control of them, because at the end of the day they're shutting down handgunners, they're shutting down cannons and archers and all those different types of things. And that's exactly the type of units that you want them on. So, you know, giant slayers here, more longbeards, lots and lots of thunderers. Great armor piercing, going to be good at basically killing everything on this side of the battlefield. Any heavily armored unit dies to a thunderer just fine. And the giant slayers are the armor piercing mohawk variant of the standard slayers. And with their great axes, they are able to absolutely cleave through heavily armored units. This Bastiladon, who has been getting focus fired pretty much most of the game, is trying to counter skirmish this cannon. One of the cannons is already offline, and I guess in that way he's doing a pretty good job. Very interesting here. The archers are still going after the skink cohorts. At this point, I would probably start changing tactics. I'm not sure yet. Can they see the shades? I imagine they can. The shades are probably one of the deadliest things on this side of the battlefield. There are how many groups of them? 1, 2, 3, 4. There's also Hargoneth executioners on the battlefield as well. 2 groups of those guys. And the Dread Spears are pushing forward. There's this kind of obtrusion here in the center, which is giving the High Elves the ability to kind of fire with impunity. And then if they need to block up this area, all they have to do is push forward with a couple groups of spearmen. And they're going to be able to protect their archers pretty easily. So the shades, right? The shades are invisible, but their range is also kind of low at 130 compared to the 180 of the standard archers. So they need that stalk so that they can get into range and start shooting. But once they do, they don't really have the best targets, right? Using their heavy armor piercing to either counter skirmish with archers or kill spearmen with silver shields is not the best use of a shade. And we can go ahead and look at the shades for those of you who've never seen them before. They're kind of these awesome looking assassin style units with crossbows. They're decent in melee if they need to fight, but they're really going to be wanting to shoot at units like the Sword Masters of Hoeth with their 90 armor. That'll be probably their best bet. Karl Franz here, it looks like he may take this charge. I would have expected something like a feint, but he's going to break up the charge, give the High Elf archers even more time to fire, and potentially break off these Dread Spears before they're able to do anything. Pretty big misplay, I would say, here from the Empire player. I would probably have left my units on the top of this hill right here. Your handgunners are now sitting, essentially, at the bottom of a hill. So, now while that does give them a bit of a clear line of sight to units who kind of crest this hill, you've really decreased your range of effectiveness to about this point here, when in reality their range is something more like out to here. But the odds of them being able to hit at the bottom of this hill are just so much lower. Karl Franz is now going to take an absolute shredding from those shades. Perhaps he couldn't see them, or perhaps it was just a bad charge. The Damsel with the Lore of Life getting crunk going into melee, that's probably a mistake. And the Brettonian player, interestingly enough, he has a nice goon squad here with King Lewin Leoncoeur. He has a paladin who has a guardian aura that's going to protect King Lewin with some physical resistance, and the Royal Hippogriff Knights coming in for a huge charge. Not sure where they're going exactly, but they're an extremely powerful unit with a ward save, physical resistance. They cause terror, and they've been buffed to have their mass increases so that they can charge in effectively. I don't know what the Empire player is doing here. He's going to take a huge charge from the Defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis and these Knight Errants. Very good anti-infantry unit. The Defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis have Frenzy. If they can get in and amongst these handgunners, they're going to absolutely crush them. The Warrior Priest here, standing in the center like a complete badass, he's got all of his abilities. So, Grand Soulfire to give magic resistance and to do a little AoE damage. He can increase melee attack as well, and he gives a bit of physical resistance to units around him also. So they're going to get these volleys off. It's going to be, pretty cool looking seeing them stand in formation, but the handgunners are going to eat this charge, when in reality the halberds are braced. They have anti-large, they have charge defense against all. They should be in front of the handgunners at this point. And if the handgunners were lined up on the top of this hill, they could be, and they wouldn't be obstructing at all. So the Royal Hippogriff Knights are getting into the back line. They may be going after these handgunners here that have been kept in reserve, or they may be deciding to dumpster these great cannons. Huge AoE fight here. King Leoncoeur is popping Stand Your Ground. Karl Franz is being hit with the Sword of Couronne from King Lewin, who is lowering his stats. Minus 27 melee defense, minus 30 armor, and they're going to take an absolute beating from the Paladin, who is now also an anti-large unit. So let's go ahead and fast forward it. Mazdamundi's kind of, oh no, that's just a Slan High Priest with Lore of Life spells. He's got some healing, and that's pretty much all we really need to know. The Companions of Quoneus are heavy armor piercing, but they're being kept in like this mega reserve here. The Hargoneth Executioners are going to get in and amongst the dwarves, but the Miners with blasting charges are going to absolutely kind of shred them. Good armor piercing on that, as long as they get to throw. Yeah, it does good damage, and it blocks up the charge. Now the Hargoneth Executioners will have no problems chewing through these Miners. These Miners didn't get their blasting charges off very well, but there's actually 3 units on the battlefield. I missed one. The Companions charge here to this huge melee fight, but they're fighting into spears. 3 units of spears is going to be very good at holding this off. Nice ward buff there. Shield of the Old Ones coming off from the sland. Going to be giving them pretty good damage reduction. Pterodon Riders with Fire Leaf Bolas. They're looking to drop rocks on the Swordmaster. That's pretty cool. You don't get to see that every day. The Royal Hippogriff Knights are in the back. Looks like they're getting healing. Regrowth. That's pretty much the perfect spell for them. The cannons have been shut down by the Feral Cold Ones. This Warrior Priest is being punted by Velociraptors. And now, kind of basically due to this poor formation, they are getting absolutely wrecked. Shield of Faith going off, giving them that damage resistance. But their handgunners are mixed in with halberds, and that's just no good. These cavalry are going to get shredded by the halberdiers, but at the end of the day, all of these handgunners are offline. And I think they're going to do a pretty good job of just getting them into a blob and then tearing them up. The Shades are firing with impunity from the top of this ridge, and their armor piercing is absolutely insane. The Chameleon Skinks have finally found a home despite being badly damaged at the beginning of this battle. Swordmasters of Hoeth are in and amongst the Men-at-Arms, who are not made for this type of fight. Not against Swordmasters. These dudes are absolutely brutal. And even the Saurus Warriors, who are warriors of legend, no doubt, but the Swordmasters of Hoeth are just going to absolutely tear through them. They're just too heavily armored. They're too powerful. More spells coming off here from the Slan Mage Beast. Probably casting Apotheosis, if I would have to guess, to get some healing to some valuable units. Cold One Knights here in and amongst the back ranks. They're fighting Lothern Seaguard, who are actually decent against them. These are the anti-large variant of the Cold Ones, and the Lothern Seaguards are anti-large variant spearman type units, so it's really a favorable matchup for them. The Dwarf Lord is coming over to help, bringing some Dwarf Warriors with him, trying to secure the back line of the High Elf player. As I said in the beginning, look at all the Dwarf resources, fighting all of these kind of, honestly, pretty underwhelming forces that are attacking them. 3 groups of Hargoneth Executioners are definitely no joke, but with all of the Thunderers with just a bit better positioning, standing at the top of this hill was really blocking off his line of sight. Had he had them positioned here, he could have really blasted them on their approach in conjunction with the Miners with Blasting Charges, and they probably wouldn't have been able to sustain in this type of combat. Murderous Prowess going off just a moment ago. Sorceress with the Lore of Death casting her spells. Purple Son of Xarius, I can't help but feel like I may have missed one of those. No, she's only got 4 kills, so I probably didn't. Would be surprised to see one of those going off, but Spirit Leeches going to absolutely tank Tyrion, and without the Heart of Avalorn, he's not going to have the ability to regen massively like he sometimes does. If you get him near death below 10% HP, he will sometimes get a massive burst of HP, and that can sometimes completely swing the balance bar. So the Empire player has been folded up, right? His formation honestly was pretty poor. I mean, great cannons here, handgunners here, halberdiers in the ditch in a defensive formation. Keep Karl Franz a bit safer than he did. Use the Warrior Priest as a fulcrum for your defensive spells. And yeah, you've got a winning combination, but put all of them right in the front, right next to each other, and you're just asking to be overwhelmed by cheap Feral Cold One style units. And these Shades are just going to be an inexorable ball of death here. Lots of ammunition left on them. You can just watch the HP on this Warrior Priest duck lower and lower. It'll probably not even make it into melee if they just keep firing. So another great Shield of the Old Ones here, as they just run over what remains of the Swordmasters of Hoeth. Yeah, the Lore Master is fleeing. The Fire Leech Bolas are shooting in. They've got a nice little position here, kind of shooting down into this blob. But the Dwarves are, I think, kind of the last bastion of power. With Tyrion dead, with the Lore Master of Hoeth routing off the battlefield, Karl Franz got wrecked. The Warrior Priest is running. The Dwarves are pretty much the last hope, and the Dwarf Lord is fighting in the pits here. He has no allies around him. He's got a Sorceress with the Lore of Death on a Cold One, making her a pretty decent combatant. Cold One Knights in the battle. Lokir fell out up to 60 kills, and because of his regen, it looks like he hasn't taken any damage at all. The High Elf player was pretty smart to either intentionally route this way so that he could get behind the Dwarf player and support him with his range. But he needs to be more on top of rallying these guys, but it looks like they're just plain old broken at the moment. The Thunderers are being pulled back. The Giant Slayers are being called in to try and slow the advance of Lokir, but with Dreaded Duelist popped with his regen and his huge stats, 91 melee attack, 82 melee defense, he just has to turn and fight. King Llewellyn Cor coming in, Some Dread Spears looking to support. I don't think there's really anything that can be done here. Lots of Thunderers still online. Some Longbeards still active as well. Their leadership is great. But with most of the leadership of all races being dumpstered, and even the Lord of the Dawi here being absolutely crushed. Look at all the guys he's fighting. And he's still kind of standing in there. He's shaken, but he's not broken. The Hippogriff Knights up to 121 kills. That's pretty cool to see units like that being made effective. And the Bastiladons being thrown into melee against standard Dwarf Warriors, it's not a bad call. Look how much damage Thunderers can do if they're just on correct targets. Wow, an absolute laser beam. And that's it. That one shot kind of is going to send them into complete and utter rout. Only the Giant Slayers were left, and they were going to fight to the last man. But awesome 3v3 battle here. Hargan of the Executioners absolutely carved up the Dwarves. They were able to make it in without sustaining much damage. Coldwell Knights got into the back line and did serious work. I think the Sorcerer Lore of Death ultimately was probably just spamming out Spirit Leeches and dropping Lords, probably on Tyrion. I didn't get to see most of the battle. This is one of those battles that was so big and so hectic that you could almost watch it twice and cast it from two different sides of the battlefield and get two different types of battles out of it. I'm sure she was just using Spirit Leech. Probably would kill Tyrion. Tyrion is a powerful combatant, and without any type of healing at all, he can get dumpstered pretty quickly. So, and also good use of Lokir Felheart. On foot, he's such a durable lord, and the Shades being able to push forward uncontested, being revealed at the last second allowed them to get really not even their full value. I mean, the battle ended, they're still at full HP. They still had probably at least 50% of their ammunition. So Shades could be pretty deadly when in the hands of a good player like Mironava. So Sparty here, the Brettonian player, let's see what he was able to do. Peasants did their job. King Lewin Leoncoeur plus his paladin here were absolute terrors on the battlefield. Lots of healing also from the damsel with the lore of life, keeping up those Royal Hippogriff Knights, which account for such a huge portion of the battle bar. Making sure it stays in your favor will make sure that your units don't rout prematurely. And, you know, Chaff Infantry did their job. Foot Squires got their value. 62 kills is nothing to sneeze at. And ultimately, you know, the Defenders of the Fleur-de-Lis and the Knights Errant are pretty cheap comparatively. And the Companions of Coneus are very expensive, as are the Royal Hippogriff Knights. I think these are like 1,500, and these, I think, are still 2K. But good use of them. I liked how mobile he was with King Lewin Leoncoeur. Sniping out Karl Franz early on was definitely a good call. And you'll see here, I think the name of the game here was the misuse of the terrain by the Empire and ultimately also the Dwarf player. Just these number of kills should not have happened. Their strategy was very sound. Just a complete, you know, and I don't want to beat a dead horse to death. They played well. I think they just perhaps didn't take advantage of the terrain itself. When you play with handgunners, when you play with great cannons, you really need to be aware of the terrain and use it to your advantage. And unfortunately, they weren't able to execute that. The halberds were a good choice, especially against Brettonia, especially against the Lizardmen, and also against the Dark Elves. Having lots of anti-large and armor piercing is valuable as well. And the Warrior Priest, I mean, by the time he was able to get in there and do his thing, most of his supporting elements were pretty much gone. You'll see not many kills on them. And the Crossbowmen, 0 kills, 0 kills, 0, 1, 2, 3. I mean, you almost could have just gone with Swordsmen and just had that guaranteed value. Might have been a better choice. And then Hassman, who I think he went the widest of all of his allies, which I think ended up playing very well for him. You know, the Chameleon Skinks with their missile resistance were able to eat a lot of this high elf focus fire, and that allowed their front lines to engage relatively healthy, right? The Saurus warriors getting in there, doing their damage, some Temple Guard getting in there, still pretty healthy as well. And the Slan Mage Priest kind of hid behind that big terrain obstruction in the center, and it was pretty safe for most of the battlefield, for most of the battle, I should say. That, you know, use of Shield of the Old One and all of the different blob fights really allowed him to keep his teammates healthy and allowed them to win. So also not letting the Bastiladons die early on was also pretty clutch. They very easily could have been focused down by the Dwarf and Empire player, But as you saw, they came in the fourth quarter, got some huge laser beam shots, and were able to turn that. And I love the use of the Feral Cold Ones. For how cheap they are, for them to get these kinds of kills, pretty cool. And the Pterodon Riders, you know, you can use these guys as ranged units. You sit them above like a blob fight where they're not being threatened, and they'll get their value. But at the end of the day, they're also very good at harassing exposed back lines. Just throw them into melee, and they'll do a great job. Kind of similar to what you would expect to see in Carrion. So the Spearmen did great. Swordmasters of Hoeth, of course, got their value. The Archers got overrun perhaps a bit too soon. And the Dwarf player here, Longbeard's always solid. Yeah, just exactly what you would expect to see from the Dwarf player. But thanks again, Miro Nava, for sending me this replay. He sent me one more, I do believe, and I may end up casting that one on the channel as well if it's the same quality as this game, because this was certainly a fun one. So guys, thank you so much for watching. I could talk all day about strategies and picks and things like that, but I think brevity is the soul of wit. And I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Once again, my channel is Good Talk Gaming. My name is Brett, said that already. I hope you consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. I love casting Total War Warhammer 2 stuff, and I play lots of other strategy games as well. As of the moment of me recording this, I'm only 2 subscribers away from hitting 100, and that's a pretty big personal milestone for me. And yeah, if you're watching this right now and you enjoyed this and you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing that. It actually means a lot to me. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.